as I was starting to meet people and talking about the movie, the doors were opening in an unusual way, something that I haven't seen before. At the time, COVID, everything was closed up. You couldn't even show a film to anybody, maybe one or two people at a time. And I thought to myself, this is a world premiere of my movie. And it took place in Vatopedi on Mount Athos. I said to myself, this is definitely a good sign.
Welcome back to Let's Talk Live on the Orthodox Christian Network. If you haven't already, join us by becoming a member of MyOCN community. Membership is always free, and you'll be the first to hear about new and upcoming programs, resources, and opportunities to share in person and online. The Orthodox Christian Network is a 501c3 corporation and a 100% donor-supported ministry. These programs are made possible and offered at no cost thanks to the generous support of our viewers. If you appreciate today's program, please consider making a donation. We are grateful for all of you who support this ministry through your contributions, your engagement, and your prayers.
We cannot take the risk of him becoming a patriarch.
You think that you can come here and pretend to be holy?
If it had been done to me, what has been done to you, I would not go to church anymore. Get out.
I lost my eyesight due to illness when I was very little. There is so much light in your presence.
It's not enough that you are trying to persuade everyone in here to become a priest. Now you're grooming nuns from here too? What are you doing with these women?
Why are you doing this?
Refrain from coming here!
Holy Mother of God, will you please pray for me?
My body may be withering away, but my soul is not.
It's good to be with you again on another segment of Let's Talk Live. We have a very special guest with us today, but before we introduce her and talk about the movie, The Man of God, we'd like to open, as we always do, with our prayer. I have lit my votive candle, which you know I do at each of these programs. I invite you to do the same, and we'll pray for a moment, and then I will introduce our guest. Heavenly King and Comforter, the Spirit of Truth, everywhere present and filling all things, the treasure of blessings and the giver of life, come and dwell in us and cleanse us of every stain and save our souls, O gracious Lord. Yelena Popovic, an amazing individual who I just had the privilege of meeting, is a Serbian-American actress, writer, director, and producer. She wrote and directed Man of God, starring Mickey Rourke. And Yelena produced Monday Nights at 7, starring Edward James Olmos, through her company, Simeon Entertainment, and has several other active projects and development, including Dead Serious, Greta Garbo, Moses the Black. She studied at Playhouse West, an industry-recognized premier acting school and training ground for actors, writers, and directors, founded by none other than Robert Carnegie and Jeff Goldblum. Yelena, welcome to the program. I want to ask you a question, just to start off with. Tell us a little bit about yourself. I mean, your upbringing. Now your name's going to be everywhere, especially all over America, in 800 theaters. Tell us a little bit about you, about Yelena.
Well, I was born in Belgrade, Serbia, quite a few years ago. And I migrated to the US when I was 18 years old. I came as a model, then I studied acting and writing and directing later on in Los Angeles. And I basically, my upbringing back in Serbia, it wasn't, I wasn't going to church because my parents, even though they were Orthodox Christians, they maybe during that time, it wasn't, most people did not go to church. It was during or just after the communist regime. It was something that most people didn't really practice. And I basically remember, which is very interesting, even though I did have faith, I must say, since I was very little. I just remember always having faith, believing there was God and there was a creator, father that watched over me, protected me and all of us, somebody that we can communicate to and get his protection and guidance. I believed in that. Honestly, I don't remember anybody telling me about it. But I remember having that feeling. But I didn't know anything about who Jesus Christ was, who Mother of God was. I knew who Saint Nicholas was. It was our Slava. We celebrated Saint Nicholas. He was a saint, but I really didn't have much knowledge about Christianity in general, not little alone about Orthodox Christianity. So when I came to the US is where I discovered all that. So because maybe because I'm just thinking out loud now, maybe because life wasn't easy. I left when I was, first I left Serbia when I was 17 years old, went to Italy, then came to the US when I was 18. I came to New York. And Yugoslavia was falling apart at the time. There was a war starting. There were difficult times. And I didn't have any friends and family. Everybody was left back home. So being quite young and just being left at taking care of myself. But again, I got to repeat, I didn't have fear because I felt like I was doing something right and somebody was watching over me. But still, I had hardship because you're on your own. I remember being in New York and many times I remember not even knowing where my rent or even food was coming from. And the reason I'm mentioning those moments is because those moments are probably the greatest moments I can remember, because in those moments of, some would say, despair, I didn't feel despair. I felt the presence of God the strongest.
Interesting. That must have been quite a culture shock to go from Serbia, New York to LA.
It is.
Huge.
So I really remember that I was afraid, I was scared, but then something was there and I would regain, something was giving me the strength. It was almost the strength would regenerate from inside and would kind of give me hope to move forwards and to still have hope and faith in what I was doing. And I think, and then when I was in New York, I would go to a church nearby. It wasn't an Orthodox church. It was actually a Roman Catholic church, St. Patrick's Cathedral.
Oh, yeah.
Street and Madison Avenue, because it was the closest church to me. I as I say, I didn't know much about anything. So I would just go in there and just, it felt good to sit and read books and do prayers in my own way. And later on, I think as I was in Miami, I heard about who the Lord Jesus was, and I felt kind of connected to it in some way. And I started to read the Bible, and little by little, by the time I was 21 years old, I was in Los Angeles. I got baptized because I wasn't baptized. At least my parents told me I wasn't baptized. The reason I'm saying that is because who knows, at that time, sometimes the grandparents would baptize a child without parents knowing. So maybe, to my knowledge, I wasn't. So therefore, I went, when I was in Los Angeles, to the Serbian Orthodox Church, as I was Serbian, and I got baptized in the Church of Saint Sava. And not until I was 26 or 25 or 26 when my son Michael was born. After my son Michael was born, my first son Michael, I didn't go to take a confession and a communion. That was the first time that I went back and took a communion and confession, and that's when I started really going to church and having life within the church and entering this arena of not only having faith, but also getting on a certain path that required a lot of struggle, especially for somebody who didn't live according to the commandments, who didn't have all that embedded in them. So it took a while. I think I was very lucky that I had gone to visit the monastery of Saint Anthony. And the reason I went there was simply because the name of the monastery was Saint Anthony the Great. And I remember reading about him, and I kind of fell in love with his strength and the zeal for fighting. And there, I kind of developed some kind of connection. And when I heard there was a monastery dedicated to him, that's what drove me to go there and visit. And I think this was a meeting Yelena Ephraim from Arizona, and going there quite often. And after that point was what helped me continuing on my path. And eventually, ironically, I was there for 15 years thinking the church was dedicated only to Saint Anthony the Great, but it turned out it was dedicated to Saint Nektarios as well. And after at 2015, I'm talking about, I went there 2000 or 2001. So now 15 years later, as I was traveling back and forth a couple of times from Europe to United States, and my script was already written, and I've already asked Saint Nektarios to bless it in Egina 2-3 times. I've gone to ask Yelena Ephraim to give me a blessing to make a movie about Saint Nektarios. And when they gave me the blessing, that's when they said, did you know, obviously the church is dedicated to him. And I felt kind of, I said, I'm sorry, but maybe I didn't notice, because it says, you see the icon. I said, okay, now I get it, but I realized at the point I thought it was dedicated to Saint Anthony the Great, but all in all, it was fantastic. So that was the beginning of the journey for the film, I believe, because right after that, I relocated back to Europe, not because of the film, but because of the family situation. Because my older son, Michael, at the time, he was 15 years old, and he wanted to stay in Europe to train his tennis. He was training as a tennis player, and he asked me if he could stay in Europe and compete on ITF tour, which is like 18 and under junior circuit. Which is easier if you're in Europe than in the United States. And we've allowed him to do that. And then my husband moved to Greece to do something. And all of a sudden I was left alone with Nikolai, who at the time was 5 years old. And I remember driving it was 2 a.m. I drove about 7 hours to Arizona. And I asked Yelena Paisios and Ephraim, well, should I move to Europe or should I stay here? I don't understand. There is something happening. Maybe we should relocate temporarily. After a few days, the advice came that it looks like it's the best for me to relocate. So I listened to that advice, and I ended up in Europe. I ended up in Serbia. My son, year 2016, decides to go back to the US. I find because he's turning 16 at this point, right. I find myself in a very difficult situation, thinking that maybe I had made a grave mistake, that I've caused problems for my whole family by relocating, since I was the one who was initiating that move at a certain point, even though it originally was initiated by both my son and my husband. But then coming to Greece to decide what I wanted to do. Did we want to go back to the US or should we stay in Europe? In that state, I remember I would walk to the church every morning, and I would have to, and I'm not saying this because I'm praying, I'm revealing this because I needed to go to church every morning and do a prayer for about an hour so I could come home and get into the state where people wouldn't notice that I was in a lot of pain. So nobody would feel that I was, bad company or imposing on somebody. And in that state, maybe as somebody now, I've been in the US at that point for 20 years, but that dream was still lingering on. And as I was in Greece and a lot of pain and turmoil, the thought came to my mind, well, maybe, there is no way, I cannot make a mistake like this. Yelena Ephraim gave me advice. I kind of took the advice from a spiritual father. Usually, if we take that advice, even if things go wrong, we must have some kind of a blessing in the midst. So I thought to myself, maybe I'm here. I have the script about Saint Nektarios. Maybe if I try to move this along, maybe I'm here because of, maybe I'll finally make a movie, that I wanted to make. I know this.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's clear that you went through cycles, which all of us go through.
Who is dreaming still out of Los Angeles, but I wasn't giving up on my dream. And ironically, as I was starting to meet people and talking about the movie, the doors were opening in an unusual way, something that I haven't seen before. And
let's talk about that in a minute. Let's talk about the, clearly there, people go through peaks and valleys, as we said, and the peaks and valleys, the fathers of the church speak of them. It's in times of despair, times of not knowing which way to go, that the Lord opens doors for us through individuals on earth, whether they be priests or monks, a parish, a family member. Some things happen, doors open, like you just mentioned. So let's talk a little bit about the motivation in you for making the film, because obviously you studied acting, as you said, you studied writing and directing. But what's the motivation? What's inside the heart of Yelena Popovic that causes her now to dedicate all this time and effort to writing a script over and over and to perfecting it?
Well, what happened was in 2012, I got to just back up a little bit to give a proper answer. I went to Belgrade, and that was a year after my father passing away. I wasn't able to go to his funeral in 2011 because I still didn't have my immigration status resolved. And if I would have left the country, I wouldn't be able to come back. So I couldn't do that at that time. And but then, thank God, a year later, I was able to go and pay respects for 1 year of him passing away. Now I'm arriving in Belgrade. It's been 10 years that I haven't seen my father. It's been years since he passed away. I couldn't go to his funeral. So clearly there were a lot of emotions rising. I go and visit the apartment where pretty much I grew up in, where he lived. Ironically, even though before I walked in, I thought to myself, I don't know how I'm going to feel now when I walk in there, but I remember that I felt warmth. It didn't feel bad or cold or disturbing. I actually felt some kind of a peace in the apartment, at least. So, but there were some things going on, and naturally it was a difficult time. I went to a place where our patriarch Pavle at the time was buried, which is not far from where my apartment is. And I went to pay respects to him because I've never met him. I heard a lot of great things about him. He was to many a holy man, a great man who, and basically, so I went to pay respects, and I remember it was Sunday, and I naturally went to attend the liturgy. And also I remember there was at the time, there were somebody's holy relics, but I didn't, in my state of mind, I didn't really ask whose holy relics were. I just simply attended the liturgy. I believe I took the communion. I venerated the holy relics, and I went to the bookstore and I saw a book about Saint Nektarios. So I didn't know about him, but I heard about him a lot. And I thought, oh, this is a good opportunity. I'll buy it in Serbian, in my own language, to read about the saint. And as it was something that I would often do before that. I enjoyed that. It would give me courage and guidance and strength. So when I started to read, on my way back to Los Angeles, when I basically read the book, is when I was struck with lightning in a way. Now, the good question would be why other stories of the saints didn't do that to me.
Why Nectarios? Why Nectarios?
They've all had a huge impact on me, and they're all dear to me. But I think there is one parallel here. My father, who had just recently passed away, was a very righteous man, and he was prosecuted because he was righteous. And he basically had lost his job. He was taken to a trial where there were 6 false witnesses brought to testify against him to get rid of him from the position. And the only reason why they did that is because he was very honest and honorable, and he wouldn't allow for people in position to do things that were unethical. He was also loved by simple people. So I witnessed a man who is of that kind of stature. When I say great stature, he was very intelligent. He was probably a leading civil engineer in the country. If people were coming to build roads or factories in our country, he would be #1 choice for anybody, especially from abroad, because they knew they could count on him, on his knowledge. And he was completely thrown out and taken to a very small factory where he worked until the end of his life. And so I witnessed what happened, and I heard a lot how he maybe should have given. He was too honest. He was too righteous. A lot of people's lives would have been better. I mean, I disagree with that. I mean, I was always proud of him, but I heard all that thing, and probably that was one of the main reasons I left at the time Yugoslavia, in hope to do something and to help my family and to make.
I'm seeing a thread between your father and Nectarios here, right?
Exactly. So
in that thread.
I think probably he just passed away. I read the book, and also there is a thread also, not, and I can't say this, this can sound bad, and I want to make it very clear. I don't have a parallel to Saint Nektarios in terms of saintlyhood or holiness.
Yeah.
But there was a parallel of a person who left the country very young, who had very difficult life, and who lived only by faith.
Sure.
And nothing else.
Nothing
else. So between my father and that, I think that's where something got crisscrossed, and
Sure.
that happened, and I had this incredible understanding for the story, a story that touched me on a very personal level. Coming from the background of studying in Playhouse West, when we worked on our projects, we were taught to work only on things that we understand, that are extremely personal to us. So when I read his story, I felt not only that I understand it on some very personal level, that I can bring humanity to this story, not to focus on the spirituality, just for simple reason that spirituality cannot be dramatized, but to focus on the truth, on humanity. And also living in Los Angeles for 18 years and watching movies on the big screen that are having a religious content, which are only 2 kinds, and they're very extreme. They're either films that usually are they're very much critically acclaimed, that are trying to tell us that church is a terrible thing, that God doesn't exist, or there are films on the other spectrum that are trying to help us to tell us that the opposite, but sometimes they could be also too much of a propaganda, and maybe done in a certain way where they cannot reach to the audience past those that already have faith.
Okay.
So when I read the book about Saint Nektarios, I felt that this would be that story that I remember once I promised God that I would, if he ever gives me a chance to make it, if I ever write a movie, I would like to do something to his glory and salvation of man. And I recognized it in the story of Saint Nektarios.
No, truly, you see people in the world who are righteous and truthful, and they are persecuted. They are persecuted because, as you point out in your movie, which we're going to get to as we go forward in our interview, it's clear that where there is light, the darkness, it very much fears it. And it riles itself up and tries to destroy that which is kind and good and honest. And obviously you saw that in your father, and clearly that's what happened in the life of Saint Nektarios, to the point where the church actually issued a letter. I don't want to take too much and tell people too much of the movie, but at the very end, the church in Alexandria says it apologizes for anything that was done to Saint Nektarios. That's a big step for the church to do. Let's talk about practical things for a minute, in the sense, those of us who go to movies, I love to go to movies. I used to take my children all the time to movies. We had especially all the releases at Thanksgiving and all the releases at Christmas time. Unfortunately, we never had a Saint Nektarios movie when my kids were growing up, but they're going to see it now. So talk to us a little bit about that. How do you choose people? I mean, how did you choose Aris Servetalis to play Saint Nektarios? How do you choose these people? That to me is a huge mystery.
Well, I must also give a little bit of a credit again to a place where I studied, because I think I've really learned my craft well. And in the sense that as I studied as an actor, therefore whatever I've done there, it helped me tremendously in working with the actors and having this very good understanding of the truth and who should be playing the part, and understanding what John Huston, a very famous film director, understood very well when he said, when I direct my movies, I do it in a casting room, which is one of the 80% of directing is actually choosing the right actors for the part. And so therefore, and especially then if we want to make something very truthful, very personal, something that can affect people, then the actor has to be so believable that even if he's not saying a word, people believe that he is the person he's portraying. So I got on a quest not only with Aris Servetalis, with the role of Saint Nektarios, but every single actor was important for me, and that was the element I was looking for in all these wonderful actors. All of them are extremely talented, and
An incredible group of actors, really.
But that was like a very important component that especially for Saint Nektarios, to have somebody that can do that. I was very lucky. I was introduced to Aris before. It's interesting. I was introduced to him. He was willing to play any part in my film. At the time, somebody else was attached to play the lead role. And then later, I had realized that he was the right person to play the part. And he is, number one, an amazing actor, a great person, and somebody who had turned his life completely around and became a very serious person of faith. And therefore, I think he's been in that realm for quite a while before I had met him. So he had really, when you see him, he has this aura where you really believe that he could be a monk, he could be a priest, a saint. So that was very important. And I was very lucky that such a great talent had those qualities and that he was willing to play the part. And that was obviously one of the most important things that happened for the film. And all the other actors were absolutely fantastic.
Everyone in the cast, from the young ladies who play the nuns in the convent to the director of the school where he taught. I mean, every single one of the people were so believable. I have to be honest with you, as I am on all these programs, I cried through 3/4 of the movie. I just couldn't believe how magnificent a story this is. And I'm urging now, probably in midway during our interview here, that everyone, not only Orthodox, but non-Orthodox, you should take your non-Orthodox friends to see this movie, to see who Saint Nektarios is, and through Saint Nektarios, to see who God can be in your lives. In America, it will show for the first time on March 21st in 800 theaters. And it's my understanding that some of those theaters are already sold out. As a matter of fact, one parish in America said, when I called them, I said, "Are you going?" And they said, "Oh, no, we're not going." I said, "What are you talking about? You're not going to see the film?" "No, Father, we rented out the whole theater. We're taking everybody there." So they rented it out a different day from March 21st. And that's an amazing testimony to this movie. Let's go back to a minute. I got to ask you one more question about the cast. Mickey Rourke, where did he come from? How did you get him involved?
Well, yeah, that's another, I would say another little miracle, or there are no little miracles, there are just miracles. Because this film, I think, had many more miracles than what we had decided to show in the film. So basically, as you know, to agree with you fully on what you've just said, that this film, I believe, has international appeal. It can appeal to anybody, regardless of their religious belief or ethnic background. And that was also one of the reasons why I wanted to make this film, and I did it in English. So we would have a chance to have a wider release. For that, we needed a couple of international actors. So as we were thinking who can play which part, I thought of Mickey Rourke for the role of a paralyzed man. It's not a very big role, but it's extremely significant role. And I believe that he's at his best in this. So knowing him, knowing his acting ability, knowing that he's actually a person of faith, I thought that, and having this depth to portray very difficult roles, to have this honesty, to go to places and to express himself the way he does, and being somebody who's obviously struggled in his life, and it shows, when you see him, shows what I mean. Mickey is an incredible person, very honest person, but just like you can see it on my face, maybe, or not, I don't know, but there are some people that have gone through quite a bit, and it just shows that they've struggled. So you would believe that this person was paralyzed or is paralyzed, and that he's going through this incredible pain and suffering. So I thought that he had all the right elements to play the role. So after, I think it took about 6 months or maybe a little bit longer, I don't remember exactly, but I managed to get hold of him. I managed to get the script to him. And I must say that when he read it, he really identified with the character, and because it was a film about a saint, and he was happy to do it.
Well, Mickey Rourke, for those of you that don't know, have never seen Iron Man, you would know that Mickey Rourke in those movies is the complete opposite of what he plays here in this. So that is, as we said, we don't want to give too much away about the movie, but please go see it, and you will see a miraculous event that take place next to Saint Nektarios and Mickey Rourke together. Lastly, Yelena, I want to ask you about the Monastery of Attribution. I'm sure, and I know that they have played a role in this. Elder Ephraim has played a role in this. We were with him yesterday on a Zoom call with about 40,000 people all over the world, talking about faith and judgment and discernment. And we talked about it there. So I'm wondering, could you give us what has happened there? Because I know there's a special relationship between the monastery, the monastic community, yourself, and the film.
Well, that's another incredible story. As I mentioned, that we started to knock on certain doors to get things necessary to make this film happen. We first, there was a producer, his name is Kostas Lambropoulos. He decided to be our producer here in Greece, which was fantastic because he has a lot of experience and has done a lot of great films in Greece, and basically, but then we went to ask for funds. Originally, it was supposed to be a co-production between Greece, Serbia, and Croatia, and with Greece being the main co-producer. However, Greek Film Center did not greenlight the film, so we had to look for a different kind of investment, which it's one thing, it's difficult to find for any kind of film, not to mention for films about saint, about God, and because a lot of people, even if they have faith, they don't necessarily believe that films like this can do well. People, they're looking at it more from a business perspective. So what was incredible is that somehow through a friend of mine, a photographer, a very good director of photography and photographer, Panayotis, who would frequently visit Vatopedi. The monks found out that there is this girl in Athens, Yelena from Serbia, who is trying to make a film about Saint Nektarios, and they had reached out to me. So that's when I ended up later on meeting with Father from Mount Athos, one of the monks who basically who traveled that time to come to the screening of the documentary of Saint Joseph of Vatopedi. And I had met him there, and they were very happy to hear what I was doing. And eventually they shared this information with the Elder Ephraim, and I had a chance to meet Elder Ephraim. And thanks to Elder Ephraim, Maria Yanaki, who produced the film with us, and the monks from Vatopedi, we ended up getting the funds to make this happen. So I felt that was a miracle. And what was incredible is that I believe it was 2019. It was in December of 2000. No, now it's 2022. So the film came out in 2021 in Greece. So then that would be 2020. I'm sorry. So 2020, end of 2020, I asked my husband to go and show the film to Yelena Ephraim when it was finished, because obviously I wanted him to see it first, as he was someone that was responsible for this being possible to happen. So when he went to Mount Athos, and it was right before Saint Sava, which we celebrate on the 27th of January. So that would be, yes. So now I'm thinking if I'm getting the year right, forgive me if I'm not, but it was basically before. Then it would have to be 2021 then of January. So what happened was my husband and I, you know, you can imagine, I've just finished the film, and it's a huge responsibility. It's not just any film. It's a film about Saint Nektarios. And
you did this during COVID too.
Exactly. During COVID, it was a lot of obstacles. It was, I put everything I had into it, emotionally, mentally, but then it's about Saint Nektarios. So that's more of responsibility, because if I have done something that people don't like, or especially people from the church, then I would really be very disappointed. So naturally, as Alexandros, my husband, had gone to Mount Athos, I shyly asked him, and I called a couple of fathers that I've known. I said, please, if you don't mind, just show it to Yelena Ephraim, maybe one or two fathers, and that's it. Let's just not show it to everybody. Well, a couple of days later, my husband calls me and he says, Yelena, I just have to tell you, there is 150 fathers will watch your movie tonight here in Vatopedi. And I remember, like, I almost had a heart attack. But somehow I gathered myself and I said, okay, I guess it's God's will. Luckily, and thank God, they all loved the movie. They were very happy. Yelena was very moved, extremely happy. And there was a huge stone that kind of came off my chest, because that was very important to me. And ironically, I said, it's quite amazing. I mean, at the time, you know, COVID, everything was closed up. You couldn't even show a film to anybody, maybe one or two people at a time. But in Vatopedi, they were able to watch. And I thought to myself, this is a world premiere of my movie. And it happened, it took place in Vatopedi and on Mount Athos. I said to myself, this is definitely a good sign.
Amazing. That's amazing. Sure. No, that's truly amazing. And the fathers there have a critical eye, a humble eye, but a discerning eye to know what is right and from what is wrong. I know we look at COVID and we see, almost 1 million people here, at least in the United States, that have died. It's been a terrible tragedy for many, many people. It's divided people. Yet during that time of COVID, we can also say that maybe the Lord was working with Saint Nektarios and with you and with other people to bring us out of that darkness into the light of truth, which is truly the movie that you did. Man of God, we encourage everyone to see it, Orthodox and non-Orthodox, of all jurisdictions, because this is truly a movie that shares with us what a man of God, or even a woman of God in the future, should be for all of us. And Yelena, we thank you for that. I'm going to say a closing prayer and we'll let you go.
Thank you, Father. I really appreciate you having me.
Lord, now let your servants depart in peace, for my eyes have seen your salvation, which you have prepared for all people, a light to enlighten the Gentiles and the glory of your people, Israel. God bless you.
Thank you again for joining us. If you want to stay in touch, you can follow us on social media and visit myocn.net for upcoming programs, daily articles, radio, and other resources, as well as our MyOCN community calendar. You can sign up for our newsletter to get the updates straight to your inbox. Man of God will premiere in the United States on March 21st for a one-day-only event in 800 theaters across the country. Visit Fathom Events to find tickets near you.